Hi everybody. About 8 months ago, I did a video about my entire Traveler's Notebook collection. Well, my Chic Sparrow. And in that video, when I got to the Odysseys, I had mentioned that these two in particular, they came with a really strong odor. And since it's been 8 months, I thought I would just do an update about how things are going with these two. I've done so many things to this. In that video, which I will link, I had so many suggestions for things that I could try, and I think I did almost everything, and then multiple times, and then I ended up just throwing caution to the wind and did really crazy things to these. So the three of these are narrow size. And like I said, they're Chic Sparrow. It's the Odyssey leather. This is the color Zeus. This is Apollo. And this is Calypso. So I don't have the strings in this one. I didn't have them in these two for a while because I was just doing all kinds of things to them. So my Zeus, I received this first. I received it alone and I really loved it. This has patinaed a lot. It's a gray color, but it's definitely gotten like that yellowy tinge to it after, it started getting brown with patina over time. And I love the marks on this. This just has ink spots, no cup rings. And I requested that this be like a smattering of freckles. And I was actually expecting tinier dots like on this. And this is actually my preferred ink pattern. I love the size of these. And yeah, so I really love this. And the only problem I have is that over time in all three of these are the only ones that I have ink on. Over time, the edges of the ink start fading and they blur out and seem like they're just kind of melting into the leather, because this dot in particular, I really loved this dot, because if you've seen the big ink splatters, it's got like the circle of ink and then little like flicks on the edges of, where it's splattered out. And this one was like a super tiny version of that. And now I can't even see any of those lines on the edges, that make it look like a little sun or something. It's all just kind of faded in and it's all blurred out, and it's on all of the ink, even these tiny little ones. They've all blurred out around the edges and, on this one as well. So that's a little disappointing, because I don't prefer how the ink ages over time. So anyway, so this one came with no odor at all. It was awesome. And so I've not done anything to this one. And I've had a few people comment that maybe it's because I got ink on these and that's why it smelled. But this came with ink, and I never had an issue with odor for that. So it turns out the most likely culprit for the odor that these had is the dye, especially the colors in the like indigo type range. So this blue and this purple, there's some kind of component in the dye that made these smell so pungent. And just as a refresher, the smell was like really stale, wet laundry. Like when you leave it in the washer for days and you forget about it, and it smells super sour. And it was like that, but like to the next level. It was intense. And I am not sensitive to smells, like I don't usually have I don't complain about smells and odors and things. Like I'm just not particularly sensitive in that way. But these were intense. And my husband is the same way, as far as like being sensitive to odors. Like he's just not really. But I was so embarrassed with these because I would have them in the room, like in the living room, and my husband would walk in and be like, good grief, what is that smell? And they would literally perfume the entire room that they were in. And I had to put them away. So the first thing that I did was I had like a dish bucket, like a really big dish bucket. And what I did was I put a layer of baking soda and then a towel over that. And then I put this like down on top of that paper towel. And then I put another paper towel on top. And then I put baking soda over that. And I had it layered like that. And I mean, I must have left these in there like that for like a month. And it was the same. Like there was no helping whatsoever. So I was getting frustrated, and so I ended up sticking them into like a gallon Ziploc bag, and I just dumped the baking soda in there with it and smushed it all around. And I did that for a few weeks. Like I would take these out, refresh the baking soda, because the baking soda would come out like stinking to high heaven. And I did that a few times, and then I was like running out of baking soda. So I was like, obviously that's not helping. So I quit doing that. People had suggested putting it outside just to let the fresh air permeate it, and then even to sunbake it. And I had done outside, like I would just leave it out like on top of my car or something in the shade. And when that wasn't working, I decided to just stick them out in the sun. And this particular leather will patina in light. So I was kind of holding off on that because I didn't want to change the color. And then that was not an issue anymore. I just wanted the smell to be gone. So I did stick them out in the sun multiple times. It was a huge fail. I did it over and over and over. Nothing worked. And so when I spoke to Chic Sparrow about it, and they indicated that it was, the dye, I, at that point, was so like, whatever about ruining these. I just wanted something that was usable. So I decided to wash these like in hot water with like dish soap. I was just wanting to do something extreme to see if anything would help these, because I was so uncomfortable selling these to anybody. Like I didn't want to. I would have been so embarrassed to have somebody pay for these in the state that they were in, like with just the smell. So that was off the table for me. I knew I wasn't going to do that. So I decided to wash them. So I washed them multiple times. And I mean, I filled the sink with hot soapy water, and I took these and I was literally like pumping soap all over it, and then like massaging it in. I dunked it in the water and I massaged it in. I let it soak in the hot water. And, cause I was like, yeah, these are going to get ruined, but I don't care. Like, as long as something comes out that is some kind of usable. And, I mean, I guess at that point I wasn't really expecting to be able to use them. I just wanted to see if anything would work to get rid of that smell. So as you can see, after washing, it warped it. So you can see how the pockets are kind of wavy on the edges in comparison to this not washed traveler's notebook. So I think it's pretty obvious, right? And then the edges, like here, there's some warping here where, it's not so nicely straight like that. So this one took washing a lot better as far as not warping as badly as this one did. But these two, even though they're the same type of leather, they're in the same leather collection, they're both Odysseys, they were so different. This one was and still is extremely stiff. I mean, it's to the point where if you try to roll it, it's gonna have little tiny micro wrinkles that don't even last. I mean, this thing is just so stiff. This one, when I got it, it was the strangest texture. I mean, it was obviously really, really saturated in something because it felt like putty in my hands, like Play-Doh. And it was so bad that if I pushed up like a part of it in with my thumb like this, it wouldn't even move the leather around it like it's moving right now. It would literally sink in right there where my thumb was. And when I would lift my finger off, there would be a huge divot in it, like a deep divot, and it would stay like it was putty. And it was the strangest thing. And what was interesting to me is when I washed both of these, a lot of blue came off of this. You could hardly see these dots when this was brand new. And once I washed it, it got so much excess dye out of here that the the dots just pop now in comparison to how it was before. This one, I mean, the water after washing this, especially the first time, it was like opaque purple, and it was dark, and it was a lot. I washed this so many times, and the dye just kept pouring off of this thing. And you could hardly make out any of the ink spots on this either. And it is so light now, but still so purple. And the thing is once I washed all that excess dye off, it completely changed the properties of how this leather behaved, because it's not putty anymore. This still is a much more pliable piece than this one, and I think that's one reason why it has wrinkled so nicely. This one, I think you can tell the edges are way more warped. This was just a much more pliable piece to begin with. So it also has shrunk. Yeah, you can see, you know, there's the top there and then the sides, and it didn't even shrink evenly. It still holds inserts beautifully, but you can tell where it has shrunk, you know, all the way around. And I think that's kind of charming, though. I don't mind that it's all kind of wonky, and obviously the pockets are way crazy compared to the way this one did. And I mean, when I finished washing them, I thought they were completely ruined, because as they dried, which took ages because of trying to get all of these areas dry, because it was just holding moisture. But once it did fully dry, it was so stiff. Like, it was just, oh my gosh, I was like, well, these are ruined. I'm never going to be able to use them. I thought if I like closed them, they would crack. And I just kept slowly bending and manipulating them. For some reason, I didn't want to put any kind of oil or beeswax or anything like that on. I don't know why, but so anyway, I wanted to see if the washing had helped with the odor. So I didn't want to add anything else to it just yet. And this, just over time of me moving it and manipulating it, and obviously I have rolled this a lot, and just moving this around too, they ended up becoming pliable again, like to the same level that they were before the washing. So that was really cool. And then as far as the odor goes, after the washing, that was the only thing that made a distinct difference. Once I had washed them, the odor like came down like 5 levels. It's still there. It's still there now, but it's really faint. Like, you have to kind of wave it and you're like, oh yeah, I smell it, or just like stick your face in it and you could smell it. But but it is so manageable now. I would use these now. It's not a problem. But after the washing, and I had noticed that it really took the smell down, then I became pretty convinced that it was the dye, because I mean, the dye came off of this so much. So I was like, yeah, okay, well, that must be it. But since there was some lingering odor, I tried putting them in the freezer. I must have had these things in the freezer for like a month. And actually that helped a lot too. Not as much as washing, but it did help take the edge off what was left. So that was really awesome. And now I'm thinking I may rub them with saddle soap or some kind of oils or something. But I've just kind of left them as is for a little while now. But I really, really love how this thing wrinkled. It came with some wrinkles, and I noticed that they were like the really thick kind. And I think it just has to do with the piece that you're given, whether it has this property or not. Because like I said, when I try to roll this one and wrinkle it, it doesn't do anything. But as I started squeezing this one, I would notice when I squeezed an area, it would form these really fat wrinkles. And I love that. So I just kept moving through here and finding the areas where it would give me a fat wrinkle, because it isn't everywhere on here. It was all over the back, which made me super happy. But you can see up here, it gave me like thinner wrinkles, but down here it was like really great. The spine gave me amazing wrinkles, and I kind of wish this area was over here, because this right here does not wrinkle at all for some reason. I've really tried to work it, but it's just a smoother area with different properties. So, I mean, this thing is so squishy now. It's really growing on me, but the spots on this one, I don't like this. So I had asked the same order notes in all of these. So I said just a sprinkling like freckles. And then for these two, they came together in the same order. I asked for like freckle dots as well. So this one, I was like, oh, okay, well, I suppose this is closer to freckles than this was. But I thought if I asked for the same thing that I would get this again. So, but whatever, it didn't happen. So this is okay. But this one, I don't like how there's clusters, because I don't like the big ink splashes. And I think because these are clustered so much, it kind of reminds me of a bigger ink splash. And then because this is doing the like blurring and fading around the edges, they're like fading into each other. So it's looking more like a single mass after all this time. So that's kind of whatever, but I kind of forgive it because I love the way the leather has wrinkled and all of the texture that's on it. So I would not recommend washing your traveler's notebooks, because another thing is that it really did dissolve a lot of the glue on the edges. I don't know if it can be seen, but you know, a lot of places on here is just held together by the stitching, and there's no glue reinforcement at all. You can see gaps between the layers of leather. It's still really strong and durable though. Like, you know, like I don't have any concerns about it falling apart or anything. But it did take off like all of the burnishing as well, which makes sense, but I don't particularly care about that anyway. So, you know, and obviously it shrunk it a little bit, and the pockets are all kind of warped, but still totally useful. And I'm okay with the shrinking too, because Chic Sparrow cuts a really large notebook. It's always really wide. So I'm good with, you know, it shrinking down a little bit. Obviously the dye has dyed some of the stitching on here. It's got like a pink tinge to it, and in the blue one as well. yeah, it definitely has like a blue tint to it. So yeah, so that's the journey these two have been on. And I've been mostly playing with this one because I'm just so attracted to it now. And I have ideas for setups for this whenever I start a new journal. Oh, and also it's funny because the inside of this was completely like this color. It was like undyed. It was like that, and now it's all purple, which is so funny. Yeah, that dye was intense. So anyway, yeah, so that's what worked the best, was the washing in soap and water. After I got frustrated and just threw caution to the wind. But yeah, so I still have these guys, and I'm hoping to get some use out of them now that they're in a fit state to be used and won't make my inserts all smelly. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all again soon. Bye.